lessons of 4 this month on the theme of prosperity. Prosperity. I pose a question to you. You don't have to write it down or speak it out. But what first comes to your mind when I say prosperity? Well, I know for me it reminded me of a great song from the so-called Great Depression of decades ago. We're in the money, we're in the money, we've got enough of what it takes to get along, or something like that. But that idea, that focus, where the mind goes on abundance or prosperity, immediately to money. And yes, money plays its part. It plays the part we give it to play in our life. But what is more essential than the financial stuff is the sense of energy in our hearts, how we greet the world. And so today I chose a title, Appreciate Your Assets. But then we have to ask, what are our assets? This morning in Divine Discussions at 9:15, Kelly led us in a spirit-opening meditation. And of course, I said what it felt like to me is my favorite word. Wow! Wow! I find I cannot say wow or the acronym World of Wonders without feeling an opening, a rise in energy, a welcoming of whatever this day is bringing, choosing what I will make of it. We all have our challenges, obstacles, frustrations, irritations. We can come up with all kinds of words. But how are we going to approach that? And if you'll bear with me, I hope to show, at least as I have found, that when I say appreciating our assets, it's not just about, oh, wow, I got a big paycheck today, or Social Security is sending me an unusually large amount this month, or someone's given me a gift, or I got a raise, or all of these valuables that we stockpile in our bank accounts or wherever we collect. Yes, hallelujah for such assets. But are there other assets in our life that we may be ignoring? And I'd like to suggest that with the right frame of mind, with gratitude, with a willingness to go forward, that those various things I just mentioned as frustrations, irritations, challenges, obstacles, we can make those into assets. And you would say, well, how can we do that? They're stumbling blocks. They're between me and my goal, me and what I want. But they are the aspects, as Maria Nemeth calls it, of the playing field. They're the hurdles, the goals, the things that we must exercise to reach our goal, to get where we want to be. Or we can let them get us down, put an end to our trying, and certainly squelch what I called that feeling of wow, wow. It was interesting in this morning's meditation. Kelly asked everyone to share the experience. And if I may summarize, it seemed that we were all amazed at how just in that moment of quiet, our whole perspective on life, our own life, the circumstances of our life, everything seemed to change. As we went through that meditation that ended with the idea that the universe is breathing me into existence. Something great is empowering, working through me. And we can apply that attitude to the challenges of life. Probably one of the most well-known scriptures is the 23rd Psalm. And I wanted to quote that this morning from a more contemporary translation. The Eternal One is my shepherd, caring for me in all ways. Spirit provides me rest in rich, green fields beside streams of refreshing water. God soothes my fears. Goodness makes me whole again, steering me off worn, hard pathways to roads where truth and integrity echo God's name. Even in the unending shadows of death's darkness, I am not overcome by fear, because you are with me in those dark moments, near with your protection and guidance. I am comforted. You spread out before me a table before my adversaries. You care for all my needs, anointing my head with soothing, fragrant, precious oils. My cup potential for my growth and my development. Well, we could have a more contemporary story from around the time of the beginning of Unity, 1913. Pollyanna, who remembers that story? Her name has come down to us as the Pollyanna principle of excessive optimism or naive optimism. But if you actually read her story, she had a pretty good idea. She called it her glad game. Her glad game. It was a way for her to shift her attention away from the hardships of life to the good, or we would say, in Unity, to find the God in it, to see the possibility. She would imagine what could be gained in whatever the challenge was before her. I think it was a pretty powerful idea of shifting the mind. Now, another great teacher of our New Thought movement, teacher of Charles and Myrtle Fillmore, Emily Cady, Ernest Holmes, many of the great leaders, first went to Emma Curtis Hopkins in Chicago. Charles Fillmore called her the greatest mystic he ever encountered. I believe he intended that as a compliment. But she taught the simple exercise. And if you listen to it, it's about shifting your attention or your focus. It's something that we practice in the Keys to the Kingdom, a prosperity course that we've taken here at Unity South. In it, she writes, look at the situation before you and affirm for yourself or make firm in your mind, this too is good. This too is God. This too is for me. And I demand of myself to see the blessing in it. To see the blessing in it. To demand that of the situation. Now, I think Emma Curtis Hopkins, who was conversant with the Hebrew and Christian scriptures and many other spiritual traditions, was probably inspired from the book of Genesis and the story of Jacob. Jacob, as he wrestled with an angel, which means a messenger sent by God. It's a very peculiar story. Jacob, left alone in his distress and doubt, in the middle of the night, encounters the stranger. They begin to fight or wrestle, and it goes on until the break of day. The angel says a curious thing. First, the angel strikes Jacob in the hip, knocking his hip socket out of joint. That's pretty dramatic. But yet, Jacob would not let him go. And the angel says, let me go, for it is the break of day. This time of inner introspection is over, the nighttime. It is now day. And Jacob says this curious thing, not unlike Emma's practice. Jacob says, I will not let you go until you bless me. Do you ever struggle with something in your life? A problem, a circumstance? Do you have the courage to look at it and say, I'm not going to let this struggle go until I find my blessing, until I learn something from it. Learn my own capacity, my own life skills, my own steadfastness, or what my own mother called when I asked her, how did you and Dad face so many trials in your life, from depressions to wars, on and on? And she said, because I had faith God would always give me the strength I needed to meet the situation. Not unlike Jacob, struggling with that angel all through the nighttime of doubt. I will not let go until I find my blessing in this situation. Another mind game was the famous one by the New Thought teacher of New York City, Emmett Fox. In his essay, The Golden Key, which has been popular and printed by Unity for decades and still available. And he boiled this seeking of a blessing in a situation down to this idea of a golden key. I actually keep a little golden key. I gave many of them out to you in the past. I keep it on my key ring. Every time I see it, it's a reminder. What is the perspective I'm holding on a situation in my life? Am I seeing the potential in it? Or am I approaching it with dread? Apparently, I need to stick with this microphone. Am I seeing the potential in it? Emmett Fox wrote of that golden key, whatever you are facing, see the possibility in it. He actually said, shift your attention from the problem to God or possibility. What is the good I can find in this situation? I know many of us have had challenges, and if we approach that challenge using the phrase of Maria Nemeth, what am I willing to be in this situation so that good, God, can come forth? I'm going into a meeting. I'm going into some unknown situation with the boss. What is the attitude? You get to choose it before you enter. Am I going in, to use the old Unity phrase, I go to meet my good? Do I go to meet something good? Or do I go in, boy, this is going to be rough. No one's going to understand me. They're going to try to crush me or my idea, put it down. Or do I go with that sense of expectation? Because as Emmett Fox said, that is the golden key that will open the door to greater possibilities in your life, is your attitude. You get to carry that key. You get to use it as you choose, or leave it in your pocket or at home on your dresser and forget about it. We have that ability to creatively meet every situation in our life, whether it's 3,000 years ago and David speaking in the 23rd Psalm. Yes, I'm walking through that valley of death or that valley of shadows or that valley of unknowing. But you, Spirit, are with me. That means I've got a resource. I've got a golden key. I've got a possibility to turn those so-called problems into assets, something valuable in my life. I know I've said it. I've heard many people say it. When they went through a trial or a challenge, you know, that was the best thing that could have happened to me. It made me wake up. I don't want to dwell on my personal stories too much, but most of you know that I moved lately. And when I first heard that my landlord had sold the condo I was renting for the last 7 years, and I was going to have to get out on schedule, which seemed rather fast to me, more his schedule than my schedule. And I realized that. At first, it was kind of a downer. It was like entering that dark valley of the unknown. But in time, as I worked on it, I began to see the potential in it. Wow! I get to create a new home, a new environment for myself. And now, even though the boxes are not yet all unpacked, I'm happy, peaceful. I move to a much more quiet environment. It allows me to find peace, to rest, to be restored when I'm at home. And isn't that what home should be about? A time of regrouping, a time of rest, getting our energies back. And I'm experiencing that. But let's look back a few months. What would have happened if I got that news that I must vacate my place? And it was like, oh no, this is the end of the world. This is awful. Oh, how am I possibly going to do it? Maybe I ought to just leave the Twin Cities, go somewhere where the grass is greener and everything's easier, and I get a handout on every corner. I would have been like that proverbial ostrich. Or around Richfield, it might be better to think of the turkeys, because there are so many. But sticking my head in the sand, saying, I don't want to look at the problem. Or do you remember, did you play this game when you were a child, as I did? Somebody's telling something and you don't want to take it in, you don't want to hear, trying to block it out instead of engaging with it, expecting good, expecting possibilities. I don't know what would have happened. I probably would have gotten myself in a messy situation. But I looked at the possibility worked that way, and now I'm enjoying the fruits of looking for the good rather than looking for the drama. Myrtle Fillmore, mother of unity, seems, at least according to her writings, to have loved one scripture more than most because she quoted it so often in her letters for people who were turning to her for support. And it comes from the letter of James. Well, already I like the sound of it. But when you start out at the beginning reading this, it's a little bit, huh? And you have a choice of seeing the truth in it or saying, what a platitude. It begins like this. James writes, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face various trials, consider it all joy. That was Myrtle's shorthand. She signed many a letter or opened many a letter with, count it all joy. Well, that sounds a little bit, and it was at the same historical time as that Pollyanna character. Count it all joy because you know that the testing of your faith, the potential to grow, produces strength and endurance. So let endurance complete its work so that you may be complete and whole and lacking in nothing. What an idea to face the challenge, to face a difficulty in your life and transform it into an asset. Some say, yes, it's easy to praise and be grateful for the good times, the abundant times, the wow times. But it takes a strong character. It takes a clear focus to face what David called that valley of shadows. That valley of what am I going to do? And look, be determined. As Emma Curtis Hopkins said, I demand to see the blessing in this situation. Do you ever demand something of yourself? Get with it. Get with it. Demand of yourself. There's a favorite writing of mine from many centuries ago from Brother Giovanni. And I'm just going to quote it in part. It's a beautiful longer piece, but I love this part. Life is so generous a giver But we, judging its gifts by their covering, cast them away as ugly or heavy or hard. Remove that covering, and you will find beneath it a living splendor woven of love by wisdom with power. Welcome it, grasp it, and you touch the angel's hand that brings it to you. Everything we call a trial, a sorrow, or a duty, believe me, that angel's hand is there. The gift is there, and the wonder of an overshadowing presence. Your joys, too. Be not content with them simply as joys. They, too, conceal more divine gifts. Isn't it a wow to wake up to the fact of how creative you are? The trick is to be consciously creative, to know what you're creating, to create with purpose. Because you're going to do it one way or the other. That's the interesting thing about it. You can get into a group and find yourself becoming the master of gossip. You can get in a group and find yourself as the leader of criticism and condemnation. You're creative all the time. Choose how you're going to be creative. We have trials. Jesus even said, you behold, you have trials and tribulations in this world, but be of good cheer, for I have overcome the world. The Christ within you, the true self within you, is creative and chooses whether it will succumb to the struggle or learn from it and move on. I'll finish with a little quick lyric. I learned this many years ago. It was written not long before I was born for the movie White Christmas. I appreciated its sentiment, its idea so much that I asked that it be sung at my father's funeral service, which I led. When I'm worried and I can't sleep, I count my blessings instead of sheep, and I fall asleep counting my blessings. When my bankroll is getting small, I think of when I had none at all, and I fall asleep counting my blessings. That kind of brings the idea of my whole talk to a conclusion. How are you going to count your blessings? Sure, we can count the blessings when they're piled up high, when we've gotten everything we could possibly want from Costco and our cabinets are overflowing with stuff, our investments, everything is abundant. Great. Yeah, that's easy. Count your blessings, name them one by one. But to count your blessings, when you have to make a real effort to find the good, that brings strength, fortitude, power, conscious creativity in your life. You're turning the so-called negatives into assets. By what? Your appreciation. Thank you. I can learn something from this. As Paul wrote, in all things, give thanks. Lots of people like to point out that if our translations are right, he didn't say, give thanks for all things. It was in all things, in all experiences. Give thanks that you can choose, that you can do over, that you can try again. you can make something of the mess that is mighty and carries you forward in life. I invite you now to turn your attention within, and we're just going to plant the seeds of this idea. To close your eyes, each one of you in your own way, to call to mind with what you may have been calling a problem, a catastrophe, a difficulty, maybe just a small little irritation. Bring it to mind, and then realize our faith, our truth in unity, that God is always and everywhere present. So what does that law, that principle, God's omnipotence, God's omnipresence, what does that mean in your particular situation? It means God is with you. Are you willing to look, to seek, to search for that good? So take a moment in the silence. Think about this situation. And imagine, what am I willing to be? To triumph, to move through this situation and come out better for it in the silence.